So imagine this. You're sitting at a table, right? And you are right in the middle of a sentence, making what you just know is like a brilliant, well thought out point.
Right. You've done all the prep.
Exactly. You've done the research. You have the data right in front of you. And the person across the table, they simply look away, they raise their voice slightly, and they just start talking right over you.
Oh, man. It's the worst.
It is. Your heart just drops. Your face gets hot.
Yeah.
And you're sitting there wondering, why do they just do that?
Yeah, and it's funny because evolutionary biology actually suggests that it took them exactly 1/10 of a second to subconsciously calculate your value in that room.
1/10 of a second.
Literally a fraction of a second. And in that time, they priced you at basically zero.
Wow. That's just brutal.
It is a brutal calculation. And the thing is, it happens entirely beneath the surface of conscious thought. I mean, we like to imagine that we live in this, highly evolved egalitarian society.
Right, where everyone's ideas are just weighed on their intellectual merit alone.
Exactly. But the reality is that our brains they're running on ancient hardware. We are just constantly scanning our environment to determine the hierarchy. So when someone talks over you, they aren't necessarily doing it out of malice.
They aren't, because it feels pretty malicious in the moment.
Right. It feels awful. But their nervous system has just simply categorized you as someone who doesn't require their attention. So they experience zero social friction when dismissing you.
Zero social friction.
Yeah.
That lack of friction is what makes it so painful. You just feel totally invisible.
Yeah, exactly.
And it seems like the fundamental error we're making here is confusing submission with cooperation. Because think about it. We are taught the golden rule, right? Treat others the way you want to be treated.
Sure, yeah.
And so we implicitly expect that the universe just operates on this system of karmic justice. Like, if I am polite, if I yield the floor to you, if I'm super accommodating, people will just naturally recognize my goodness and grant me respect.
But they don't.
They don't.
Mm-hmm.
And when we look at the source material for this deep dive, the architecture of respect, commanding authority, and human value, it paints a completely different picture. Respect is not an entitlement. It's an invisible currency.
It really is. And it's a currency that you must actively command. If we look closely at the mechanics of human interaction, respect operates so much like a shadow economy.
A shadow economy. I like that.
Yeah, because there are these unseen ledgers and unwritten rules. When you yield the floor to be polite, your conscious mind thinks, I'm being a good collaborator.
Right. I'm being a team player.
Exactly. But the other person's subconscious mind, it registers, this person's ideas are a lower priority than mine.
Wow. So you are unwittingly handing over your currency and expecting a return on investment that the social market just does not provide.
Exactly. You're playing by the rules of a morality play in a world that actually operates on the mind games of power.
Yeah. And I think we really need to look at exactly how we are spending this invisible currency.
Right.
Or, more accurately, how we're just throwing it away.
Totally.
Because the text points to a main culprit for this loss of status. And it's a hard pill to swallow for a lot of people. It's the trap of being too nice.
Yeah, the people-pleasing trap. It's just devastating to your social standing. But to really understand the mechanics here, we have to separate genuine kindness from people-pleasing.
Right, because the source says being kind is great. Right?
Oh, absolutely. Kindness is fantastic, but they look similar on the surface while operating from entirely different biological and psychological engines.
Okay, break that down for me.
So genuine kindness is an act of surplus. It comes from a place of secure emotional resource. You have enough energy, enough time, and a stable sense of self-worth, so you can just freely give to someone else.
Like a gift.
Right, a gift. You do not require a structural change in your relationship with them as payment for that kindness.
Got it. But people-pleasing seems to function, entirely as alone. And honestly, a predatory one at that.
Yes. The text actually uses this fascinating concept to describe it. They call it the covert contract.
The covert contract. Okay, so how does that work? If I am a people pleaser, I'm operating on this internal logic that says, if I say yes to everything you ask, if I just abandon all my boundaries
and make myself endlessly available to solve your problems,
then you are obligated to recognize my sacrifice.
Yeah.
You will validate me and you will give me respect.
Exactly. That's the contract. But the fatal flaw in the covert contract is right there in the name. It is covert.
The other person never signed it.
They never signed it. They have absolutely no idea that your yes was this massive sacrifice.
Right. They don't know that you canceled your dinner plans or that you're running on like 3 hours of sleep or that you were just burning with internal resentment while you helped them.
To them, it simply looks like you have nothing better to do.
Wow. I was thinking about how this translates to economic principles.
Right.
Let's look at the market value of a high-end consultant.
Okay, I like this.
Right. So imagine someone who charges $1,000 an hour because their expertise is just rare and highly effective.
Very high status.
Yes. But if that same consultant suddenly decides to offer their services to one specific company for free, and they're suddenly on call 24 hours a day.
Well, the company might be thrilled initially.
Exactly. Initially, they're like, this is amazing.
Mm-hmm.
But human psychology dictates a really predictable shift here because the supply of that consultant's time is now infinite and unconditional.
Right. And the foundational rule of economics is that when supply is infinite, the market value drops to zero.
Drops straight to zero.
Yeah.
The CEO just doesn't see them as a premium asset anymore. If the consultant is like 5 minutes late, the CEO gets annoyed, completely forgetting that the service is literally free.
Yeah, because the consultant has transitioned in the CEO's mind from a highly valued expert into basically standard office equipment.
Well, that's a great way to put it. A printer that dispenses advice.
Right. And that mechanism perfectly explains what the text calls the doormat effect. Because when you lack boundaries and you make yourself perpetually available, the perception of your identity fundamentally shifts.
You stop being seen as a person.
You stop being seen as a person of intrinsic value, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And you are instead viewed as a utility, a tool.
And you can't respect a tool.
It is impossible for the human brain to respect a tool. We use tools. We discard tools when they break. We do not revere them.
That is, wow. It really forces us to look at the emotional engine driving our actions, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Because the line between being a helpful, collaborative team player and becoming a tool seems to hinge entirely on, well, anxiety versus agency.
That's a really good distinction. Anxiety versus agency.
Right, because if my coworker is drowning in a project and I just choose to stay late to help them because I genuinely want the project to succeed.
And you feel totally fine about it the next day, regardless of whether you get a parade or a thank you card.
Exactly. That's agency. But if I stayed late because I'm terrified they won't like me if I leave and I spend the whole drive home just feeling bitter and exhausted, that's anxiety.
And humans are exquisitely tuned to detect that anxiety. I mean, we possess this incredibly sophisticated olfactory and visual system for social desperation.
There's social desperation. We can smell it.
We literally can. When you operate out of the fear of saying no, your whole body language changes. Your vocal tone thins out. You over-explain everything.
I do over-explaining. I do that.
Right. And the person you're helping, they subconsciously register that your assistance is not some generous gift from a place of strength. It's a frantic attempt to buy their approval. They smell the fear.
So we are just bankrupting ourselves. We are hyperinflating the market with our constant availability.
We really are.
But, okay, if saying yes to everything and yielding constantly signals low status, we have to look at what behaviors actually signal high value. Because the text outlines some incredibly specific psychological triggers that communicate authority. And the first one challenges almost everything we're taught about communication.
Right. The power of silence.
Yeah. Silence.
Silence is probably the heaviest tool in the entire architecture of respect.
Yeah.
But our modern environment, it conditions us to view silence as a void, right? Like a failure of communication.
Yeah, an awkward gap that just must be frantically filled.
Exactly. But if we look at the neurobiology of an interaction, silence is an active, pressurized space. The text draws a really sharp contrast here. Low-status individuals feel this compulsive need to fill silence with nervous chatter.
Always talking.
Always. Whereas high-status people are completely comfortable letting it sit.
So let's look at the mechanics of what is actually happening in the brain during a prolonged pause in a conversation. Say you pitch an idea to your boss.
Yeah.
Right? And they just look at you for 3 seconds without saying a single word.
Okay, so in that 3-second window, the socially anxious brain perceives a literal survival threat.
3 seconds is a survival threat.
To the amygdala, yes. The lack of immediate verbal validation is interpreted as rejection. So the body initiates a stress response. Cortisol floods the system. Your heart rate elevates.
Fight or flight kicks in.
Right. But because you cannot physically run away from the boardroom.
Which would be weird.
Yeah, highly unrecommended. Flight actually manifests as verbal appeasement.
Oh, I see. You start throwing words into the void to build like a bridge of safety. You start backpedaling.
Exactly. Well, it's just a thought. You don't have to do it. It might be too expensive anyway. I'm just brainstorming.
You actively dismantle your own argument.
Because the physical discomfort of the silence is just unbearable to you. You are rescuing yourself from the tension.
That is so true. I've seen people do that so many times.
But now, consider the physiology of the high-status response. A person operating from a place of high value delivers their idea, and they stop.
They just let the silence sit.
They let it sit. They are not immune to the tension, right? But their parasympathetic nervous system is engaged. They are regulating their breathing.
So they're signaling biologically that they don't require the other person's immediate validation to feel secure in their physical space, or their intellectual stance for that matter.
Exactly. It's the difference between waiting nervously for a grade on a test and presenting a piece of art in a gallery and giving the audience time to absorb it.
I love that analogy.
Yeah.
But I do have to play devil's advocate here and push back on the application of this because, if someone just sits there, staring blankly, refusing to speak,
Yeah.
isn't there a risk that they just look completely disengaged or, frankly, just bizarre?
Oh, for sure, if it's done wrong.
Right. So how does one distinguish between a powerful silence and just a frozen, awkward silence?
So the distinction lies entirely in micro-expressions and physical tension. Freezing is still a fear response. I mean, if you stop speaking, but your shoulders are practically touching your ears and your breathing is shallow and your eyes are just wide with panic.
You're broadcasting the deer in the headlights signal.
Exactly. You are communicating that you are trapped in the silence, not commanding it.
So projecting comfort really requires physical anchoring.
It requires physiological relaxation into the silence. You finish your sentence, your facial muscles remain neutral, your breathing is deep and steady, and you just maintain a relaxed posture.
You're actively giving them the gift of space to process your words.
Right. You are projecting the reality that your words possess enough density to warrant that processing time. And when you finally do speak again, you aren't wasting breath on filler. The words carry real gravitational pull.
Which leads directly into the visual component of this anchoring, right? The second psychological trigger from the text is eye contact.
Yes.
But it's not just the generic advice of, make sure you make eye contact. The source is extremely precise about this. It says to hold the gaze for just a fraction of a second longer than is socially usual.
Yeah, this is where we get into the millisecond timing of the human visual cortex. We are calculating machines when it comes to eye contact. We know the exact rhythm of a standard, polite gaze.
Right, we know precisely when someone is supposed to break eye contact to signal non-threat, which usually involves looking down or looking away laterally.
Exactly. And looking down exposes the neck, metaphorically speaking. It's a submissive gesture that says, I concede the floor. I am not a challenge.
And looking away laterally often signals distraction or like a break in cognitive focus.
Right. But when you maintain that relaxed, steady gaze for just one beat longer than the expected social norm before casually looking away, you send a highly specific signal to the primitive brain of the other person.
But I can imagine people trying to implement this and accidentally locking into an unblinking predatory stare, which just initiates an aggressive threat display, right? Why are you staring at me?
Yeah, don't do that. That happens when the extended gaze is combined with physical rigidity. A tense stare is an escalation, but a relaxed gaze that lingers slightly longer than expected. That communicates immense self-assurance.
Because it says, I am entirely comfortable observing you. I'm not intimidated by your presence, and I feel no frantic urge to look away just to appease you.
Exactly. It generates a tiny, almost imperceptible spike of tension in the interaction.
And tension, managed correctly, is the prerequisite for respect. It establishes you as a peer, or even an authority, rather than a subordinate who's easily blown around by the social wind.
Beautifully said. When you layer the physiological calm of silence with that lingering observational eye contact, you completely rewrite the unspoken hierarchy of the room.
You become a presence that must be accounted for.
You transition from someone seeking permission to exist in the space to someone who actually owns their portion of the space, which makes the third trigger incredibly potent.
Right, so we've covered the absence of sound and the visual anchor. The third trigger is verbal. It's the linguistic boundary wall. The no factor.
Third factor.
The source states that nothing earns respect faster than a firm no when a request violates your values or your capacity. Yet all our societal conditioning tells us that being cooperative and saying yes is how we build alliances.
Right.
So it seems super counterintuitive that refusing someone would actually increase their estimation of you.
Well, they may prefer you in the short term when you say yes because you are absorbing their friction. You are making their life easier at the expense of your own.
Sure.
But liking and respecting operate on entirely different psychological circuits. We like things that are convenient. We respect things that have structural integrity.
That's a great distinction. I think of the word no kind of like a firewall on a computer network.
Okay.
Yeah. A people pleaser has basically disabled their firewall. Any request, any demand, any virus can just walk right into the system and drain all the processing power. Saying no activates the firewall to protect the core operating system.
That is a very apt structural comparison. When you say no, you are demonstrating that your internal value system, your time, your priorities, your ethical boundaries is stronger than your desire to appease the person standing in front of you.
You are proving that you are not infinitely malleable.
Exactly. But the delivery of the boundary is where people seem to stumble so often.
Oh, absolutely. A low status no is almost always wrapped in like 1,000 apologies.
Always.
Oh, I'm so sorry. I would love to help, but my car broke down and I have this huge deadline. And we try to soften the blow so much that the boundary itself just becomes completely invisible.
Because we are trying to manage the other person's emotional reaction, we are terrified of their disappointment. But a high-status individual simply states the boundary without all the decorative apologies.
They just say, no, I won't be able to take that project on. Or, no, that timeline does not work for my team. Clean, firm, and unadorned.
It requires the courage to tolerate their temporary disappointment, because when someone witnesses you withstand their disappointment without immediately crumbling and taking the no back, their internal calculation of your strength skyrockets.
You have established the limits of your territory.
Right. The firm no, the comfortable eye contact, and the silence that follows, they create an impenetrable display of authority.
But, and this is a big but, there's a massive catch to all of this. It brings us to the internal framework that makes these external signals even possible. Because you can practice the silence, right? You can practice the eye contact in the mirror. You can memorize the exact script for saying no.
You can try.
But if your internal monologue is just a frantic loop of panic, if your heart is hammering and you are desperately praying the other person still likes you, these physical cues are just a costume. And the human brain is a master at detecting incongruence.
Oh, absolutely. Microexpressions will betray the internal state every single time.
Every time.
The slight tremor in the vocal cords, the rigidness of the jaw, the microscopic darting of the pupils. If the internal state does not match the external posture, people perceive it as bizarre, or untrustworthy, or manipulative.
You just cannot successfully fake the physics of high status.
No, you can't. Which means we have to undergo a fundamental shift in our internal identity. We have to flip the script on validation completely.
And the text provides a single profound psychological instruction for entering any room, right? Whether it's a boardroom, a networking event, or a first date.
Right.
Most of us, especially if we have those people-pleasing tendencies we talked about, we walk through the door and our brain instantly asks, do they like me?
It is the default setting for social survival. Do they like me?
But the instruction is to forcefully replace that question. Instead of asking, do they like me?
Yeah.
You must ask yourself, do I like them?
Just swapping those two questions. The structural reorganization that occurs in the psyche is immense. It changes the entire direction of the evaluation.
Let's dissect the psychology of that first question, though. When I walk into a room asking, do they like me? I am immediately placing myself in a state of severe deficit.
Yeah, you are.
I have metaphorically handed a clipboard and a grading pen to every single person in that room, and I've placed myself on the auction block. I am just waiting to be appraised.
You are actively seeking an external source to regulate your internal sense of worth. You're basically communicating on a subconscious level. I do not exist as a valuable entity until you confirm my value.
It's a complete abdication of power.
Yeah.
It reminds me of the standard, terrifying dynamic of a job interview.
Oh, the classic example.
Right. You sit across from a panel of 3 managers, and you are sweating through your shirt thinking, please hire me. Do they think I'm smart? Did I answer that question right? Am I smiling too much? You are literally begging for validation from the authority figures.
And the panel registers that desperation. And paradoxically, it makes you a far less attractive candidate.
Because desperation signals low market value.
Exactly. If your skills were truly a top-tier, highly sought-after asset, you would not be operating from a place of panic. You would be evaluating the fit.
Yes. Now imagine flipping that table in your mind. You walk into the exact same interview with the exact same panel, but your internal monologue is driven by the second question.
Do I like them?
I have valuable skills. I have spent thousands of hours honing my craft. Is this company good enough for my talent? Is this manager someone who can actually lead me? Does this corporate culture align with my ethical standards? Suddenly, you are not begging for a job.
You are the appraiser deciding whether to invest your career capital in their organization. You take the clipboard back.
You become the arbiter of value.
And the text notes that this single internal shift in perspective naturally alters your external physical presentation without you having to consciously manage it at all.
Because your nervous system is no longer preparing for rejection. It is engaging in observation.
Precisely. When you are evaluating someone, you naturally lean back slightly in your chair. Your breathing slows down because you are processing information, not preparing to flee.
Right.
You naturally maintain steady eye contact because you are studying their responses. You utilize silence naturally because you are weighing their answers against your internal standards. The high-status physical cues we discussed earlier just become the effortless biological byproduct of your internal framework.
It is a complete paradigm shift.
Right.
And it ties directly into another dynamic the source explores, which is the immense allure of self-sufficiency. People are naturally attracted to and inherently respect those who appear to need nothing from them.
It's so true.
But why? Why does the person who doesn't need us command so much more respect than the person who is eagerly trying to win us over?
Well, we can trace this back to evolutionary resource allocation. An individual who is desperately needy, whether that's emotionally, physically, or socially, represents a drain on the tribe's resources. They require constant reassurance, management, and energy, and we instinctively pull away from a drain.
We don't want to carry dead weight.
Exactly. But an individual who is self-sufficient is a net positive to the environment. They generate their own energy. So when someone signals that their emotional well-being is not dependent on your approval, it makes their approval highly coveted. We want to be selected by the person who has options, not clung to by the person who has none.
If you need me to survive, your friendship is just a survival strategy. But if you don't need me at all, and you choose to spend time with me, that is the highest compliment.
Right.
However, this internal shift, strutting into a room asking, do I like them, can very easily devolve into delusion or sheer arrogance if it is not grounded in reality. Like, you can't walk into a room of aerospace engineers having never studied physics and act like you are evaluating their intellect. You will just look ridiculous.
Oh, yeah, the entire architecture collapses without the bedrock prerequisite. The internal shift is a multiplier, but it must be multiplying a baseline of genuine competency.
The text is very clear on that.
Very clear. You must be so good at what you do that they cannot ignore you. Competence is not a psychological trick. It is not a micro-expression you can learn in 5 minutes. It is the result of focused, sustained effort over time.
It is the justification for the command. If I am highly competent at my job or deeply knowledgeable in my field, I have built intrinsic value.
Yes.
And that track record is what allows me to genuinely stop seeking external validation. I don't need the room to tell me I'm capable because the undeniable evidence of my capability already exists in my history of execution.
Exactly. Competency builds the internal structural integrity. The psychological triggers, the silence, the boundary setting, the self-sufficiency are just the mechanisms for communicating that value in the moment. But the value itself must be real. Competence secures long-term respect.
So we have the foundation of competence, and we have the internal framework that dictates how we carry that competence into the room. But theory must eventually meet the crucible of reality.
Always does.
It's one thing to project confidence when everyone is being relatively polite,
Yeah.
The true stress test occurs in a high-stakes moment of conflict. What happens when someone is actively trying to manipulate you, cross your boundaries, or just blatantly disrespect you?
Yeah.
What is the absolute strongest tool in the arsenal?
This brings us to what the source considers the ultimate power move. It is the #1 secret to making anyone respect you instantly, and it is singular in its effectiveness.
And that is
The willingness to walk away.
the willingness to walk away. It sounds so simple, yet it is incredibly rare to witness in practice. Let's analyze the mechanics of manipulation to understand why walking away is like the nuclear option of social dynamics.
Okay, so for a person to successfully manipulate you or continually subject you to disrespect, they must rely on one fundamental assumption about your psychology.
Which is?
They must assume that you need the relationship, the job, or the deal more than you need your own dignity.
Wow. That is a staggering realization. They assume you need the deal more than your dignity. That assumption is their entire source of leverage.
It is the fulcrum of control. If a toxic manager is berating you in front of the team, their implicit leverage is, you will tolerate this because you are afraid of losing your paycheck.
Right.
If a romantic partner consistently belittles you, their leverage is, you will stay because you are terrified of being alone. Manipulation requires your active complicity, and that complicity is almost always born of fear.
So what happens to the power dynamic the moment you introduce the genuine willingness to walk away?
The exact moment the manipulator realizes they have miscalculated, the moment they see in your posture, your eye contact, and your silence that you are perfectly willing to burn the bridge, lose the job, or walk out of the relationship to preserve your dignity, their leverage evaporates. It vanishes instantly.
And without leverage, they are powerless.
Powerless. And nature abhors a vacuum. When their power over you disappears, it is instantly replaced by respect. They suddenly realize they're dealing with an autonomous, formidable entity, not a dependent subject they can just control.
But overcoming that fear is a massive psychological hurdle. The source explicitly points out that most people stay in bad situations because of fear.
It makes me think of the behavioral economics concept of loss aversion. Our brains are literally hardwired to prioritize avoiding pain over acquiring gains.
Right, the pain of losing something we already possess, even if that possession is a miserable job or a highly toxic relationship, registers in the primitive brain with much greater intensity than the potential joy of gaining something better in the future.
Because the known misery feels safer to the nervous system than the unknown void.
We cling to the devil we know because the void represents chaos.
To possess the true willingness to walk away, you must conquer that biological fear of the void. You must overcome loss aversion. The person who can look at the unknown and decide, I prefer the uncertainty of the void over the certainty of this disrespect, is the person who holds absolute power in the interaction.
I do want to debate a crucial nuance here, though, because the line between walking away as a power move and just being a flake who quits when things get hard seems very, very thin.
That's a fair point.
If we glorify walking away, don't we risk encouraging a mindset where people just bail the second they experience any discomfort or friction? How do we define the difference between quitting and preserving dignity?
It is a vital distinction, and I'm glad you brought it up. Walking away as a power move is never about avoiding hard work or fleeing from necessary friction. It is strictly about refusing to participate in your own degradation. We have to look at the terms of the engagement.
Okay, let's run a hypothetical scenario to illustrate that. Say you enter a really demanding business partnership. The hours are grueling, the market is unforgiving, and the stress is just immense. But your partner treats you as a peer. They listen to your input, they share the heavy lifting, and they respect your boundaries. If you walk away from that simply because you're tired of the effort, that is quitting.
That is abandoning a commitment due to fatigue. That does not command respect. It diminishes your reputation for reliability.
Right. But take that exact same partnership. The business is wildly profitable. The work itself isn't even that hard. Yet your partner consistently belittles you in front of clients, steals credit for your strategic ideas, and actively ignores the boundaries you've explicitly set.
Now it's a totally different situation.
Right. If you look at all that guaranteed money on the table, and you look at your partner and you say, my self-respect is worth exponentially more than my share of these profits, and you walk out the door, that's the power move.
Because you are sacrificing guaranteed external gain for internal integrity. You are proving, with action, that your dignity is not a commodity that can be purchased.
And ironically, that is often the precise moment the disrespectful party will panic.
Oh, absolutely. They will try to pull you back. They will promise to change. They will suddenly offer you more money because they finally recognize your true market value.
But the willingness must be absolute, right? You cannot use the threat of walking away as a bluff just to negotiate better treatment.
No, if you bluff and they call it and you stay, your currency drops below zero. You transition from a doormat to a hostage. You have proven that your boundaries are purely theatrical.
The intensity of this requirement, to be truly unafraid of the void, means you have to be perfectly comfortable relying entirely on yourself. You have to know that if you step out into that unknown, your internal foundation will actually hold you up.
Yes.
Which means it is mathematically impossible to demand respect from the world if you do not actively grant it to yourself.
This brings the entire architecture of respect full circle. The external battles for status, authority, and dignity are ultimately won or lost in the internal arena of self-stewardship.
And the source text concludes with this stark reality. The external boundary setting we discussed, the comfortable silence, the prolonged eye contact, the firm no, the willingness to walk away. None of it matters if your internal boundaries are collapsed. Respect starts with the way you treat yourself.
You are constantly broadcasting a template to the world, a blueprint on how to handle you. We think our private habits are invisible, but they seep into our public posture.
The text highlights specific pillars of this internal template. Your sleep, your physical health, your personal goals. I mean, if I routinely sacrifice my sleep to binge watch television until 3 a.m., what am I actually signaling?
You are demonstrating to your own nervous system that your physical restoration and cognitive health are low priority items. You are willing to trade them for cheap dopamine.
Wow.
And if you continuously abandon your personal ambitions the moment a minor distraction or a request from someone else arises, you are demonstrating that your own goals are highly negotiable.
And if my own ambitions and my own health are negotiable to me, it is completely irrational to expect them to be non-negotiable to my boss, my clients, or my friends. They will subconsciously read the blueprint I have provided.
Exactly.
If I treat myself like an afterthought, the world will happily oblige and treat me like an afterthought.
The boundary wall must be built internally first. You must learn to say no to your own impulses that degrade your physical or mental value. You must learn to hold space for your own well-being. True authority is not a theatrical performance. It is an emanation of how you govern yourself.
It's like constructing a fortress. You can install the most intimidating heavy steel doors on the front. You can master the eye contact. You can memorize the power moves. But if the foundation of the fortress is rotting because you don't sleep, you fuel your body with garbage, and you routinely break promises to yourself, the slightest pressure from a manipulator will knock the whole structure down.
When you relentlessly protect your health, your time, and your mind, you naturally develop a psychological gravity. You don't have to force respect. It simply exists as a byproduct of your self-stewardship.
This has been a massive paradigm shift. We want to leave you, the listener, with a call to action based on this architecture. We encourage you to go out today and start testing these principles.
Start small.
Yeah. Find one minor request that drains your energy and practice delivering a clean, unadorned no. Hold eye contact for just one fraction of a second longer with the person handing you your coffee. Notice the physical urge to fill an awkward silence with nervous chatter. Take a slow breath and close your mouth.
It is a lifelong practice of physiological and psychological regulation, but the return on investment is the complete reclamation of your own identity.
To wrap up, I want to leave you with a final provocative thought, something to analyze while you were driving or going for a walk. We established at the very beginning that respect is the invisible currency of human interaction. And we just spent the last hour breaking down exactly how you are the one who sets the market value.
You control the ledger.
So look honestly at your life, your relationships, and your career right now. What is the exact exchange rate you are currently accepting for your own time, your health, and your dignity every single day?
Are you trading hours of your finite life for pennies of external validation?
And if you are, is it time to raise your prices? You do